One of the other group leaders who led culinary arts this past week, he went by the name of Tag, those are his initials, asked me 3 times during the week if my sermon was ready. And judging by the look on my face, all 3 times he said, "God will provide." The second scripture reading is in the 15th chapter of the Gospel according to John. We are revisiting the texts from the very first week of this worship series, starting in the first verse. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. God removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, God prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit. Because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in God's love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." May God's blessing continue to rest upon the experiences of Scripture on this day. May it guide the meditations of our hearts and the words of my lips. Read it carefully. I love Maxine. I love Maxine. I keep hitting escape, but I'm still here. Are we still abiding? So we started this worship series with the same text that we have heard today, so no, you're not having a deja vu moment. We've had them recently before. And on that first day, I spent a lot of time talking about what John and Jesus were doing with this image of abiding, playing with the grapevine, and what it is to be attached to the fact that the fruitfulness that we have is not for ourselves. It is for the world, that God may be glorified. That our joy may be complete. This past week, I was out in the mountains. Craig Springs is a former resort. It was built in the early 1900s and ran up and through the Depression era, so it didn't run long as a resort. And then the region of Virginia bought it in the 1960s. A whole lot of property, half a mountain. You can walk to West Virginia before you leave camp. And this week there were about 40 campers that were up there. About 10 volunteer staff doing different things: photography, culinary arts, drama, music, things along those lines. And as I got to know the campers, one thing became evident. The staff that were coming and the congregations that were sending these campers, they were seeking to be fruitful through the campers that went. The congregations and the staff were seeking to abide and to do the things of God, especially peacemaking this week, to be connected in a meaningful way. But a significant number of the campers that came did not attend church. Did not attend church regularly. One or two of them even described themselves as not churchy people. Some that came have been coming for years, but they are not part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ movement. So there must be something about this time at Craig Springs, this resort that was built around a healing spring that has now become a place of fruitfulness to the glory of God for people who actually don't go to church regularly. Now, I struggle with that because I like the idea of people going to church regularly. Yeah, To me, regular attendance is part of abiding. Being part of a community is part of abiding. It might not necessarily look like this. It might look like a Bible study or a fellowship group. It might look like a wine bar or a fast food restaurant. It might look like your kitchen table with your friends gathered around, or it might look like a support group. I believe in being connected in community. And so I wondered how it was that those of us who were staff who are seeking to abide, to be connected in some way, might continue to be fruitful for these campers who came who aren't connected to community. But as usually happens when you're thinking about God, I got it wrong. Those campers who aren't part of a church regularly, their fruitfulness blessed me. My first year up at camp, and I don't know where things are at, and people are being kind enough to show me around. My first year up at camp, and I get there and I get settled in, and I said, "Where's the air conditioning?" And they didn't laugh me off the mountain. My first year at camp, my first time leading a photography group, and campers that they won't say a peep, open up and say, "I appreciate what you did. Thank you for pushing me." So in those moments when I thought to myself, I need to get out of here because it's not a good fit for me. This camp is not what I'm used to. It's not the community I'm used to. It's not the place that I feel connected. These campers who don't have those regular communities drew me in the same way that God reaches out to all of us. And I find that I am now attached to branches in other places. I'm reminded that the church is bigger. The church is broader. And so the question of abiding doesn't necessarily come down to a singular point in place. It comes down to that bigger connection to God through Christ. Abiding, being connected, might happen in ways that the majority of us would not recognize, and I am thankful to those campers that were willing to bring me in and be Christ to me again in very unexpected ways. So are we still abiding? Are we seeking that sort of life of Christ, right? It's not just sort of the connection as in being physically present, although I believe presence in community is incredibly important, but it is that life-transformed sort of connection that takes place, that being rooted and growing out. Are we still there? Are we in that place after 4 weeks or 4 months or 40 years, 50 I guess in the case of this congregation, right? Craig Springs just celebrated 50 a handful of years ago. We got a lot in common, us and Craig Springs. I climb up on this mountain every Sunday. And so on that mountainside, as I was wrestling with what it was to be in this new place, I was reminded that the vine that I am is connected to the branch, no matter where I might be at. The vine that we are is connected to the branch wherever we might be at. And as long as we are seeking to abide, as long as we are loving in the ways that keep the commandments, as long as we are confessing the dangerous hate that threatens to separate. That was a big part of camp this week too, peacemaking and dealing with conflict. That dangerous hate that separates, then we manage to hang on, don't we? Thanks be to God, through the Spirit, we manage to hang on in some way, shape, or form. And we find that in strange moments and in new places, not only are we fruitful for the world, but that others are fruitful for us. That we might receive the nourishment. I went to the mountains that I might bear good fruit for others, and I went to the mountains and was fed myself. Are we still abiding? Are we still hanging in? Are we still present? Are we still in the moment? Are we bearing fruit that others who might come into this community be fed? Are we bearing fruit in ways that will feed the world? And are we receiving the fruit from others, that God may be glorified, that we might continue to live and love in the commandments, and that all joy may be complete? Because being church today is not just giving of ourselves, it's humbly receiving. Are we still abiding? I think the answer is yes. Thanks be to God. Amen.